everyone. Welcome to See Live number 5 podcast. Today's podcast is actually sponsored by last week's sponsor as well, A to Z Creations. They are a design team based in Liverpool and in Manchester, and the See Live podcast listeners can get a free consultation with the code NEWCLIENT10. Let A to Z take the first step in creating a slick and stylish creation today for you. But I'll talk about them in later on in the podcast. But as always, I've got my friend, my good friend, Chris Barnes. How you doing, Chris?
How are you, mate? How are you?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. Another week. My hair's still getting longer. I can't get it.
Don't talk to me about that. It's just coming back now.
Do you know what?
What have you been up to this? What have you been doing this week?
I've been quite busy, actually. Been doing a lot of work, getting some questions for our guest today. Just general. Rachel's been back in work. Obviously, the Easter break's off, so I'm letting her do teaching work. But no, it's just and of course just chilling and just relaxing as you do.
I've noticed this week as well. I've been watching your Instagram. You've been baking this week, haven't you?
I haven't. Well, I haven't been baking. Rachel's been baking. To be fair,
you've been just eating it.
I've just been eating it. That's how I roll. But on to our guest, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege and pleasure to welcome a friend of ours as well. We've worked with this person, Mr. Alex Carr. How you doing?
Hello, I'm good, thanks. How are you guys?
We're good. We're chilling. We're
relaxing. busy.
I'm busy, and
yeah.
Even though the quarantine is still happening, I feel like we've had a tiny little influx. I don't want to jinx it too much, but we've been speaking, me and Chris, to well, we won't mention any names, but potentially someone really big over in the States, haven't we, Chris?
Yeah, we've had a little discussion with an organisation, and we're going to have some further chats this week, I think, and hopefully we can all chat together. So we'll see what happens.
Now,
that sounds
talking
fun.
about America, probably one of the biggest things that people are doing at the moment is sitting watching Netflix, and that kind of ties into yourself, Alex. You work for Netflix.
Yeah. So I'm sort of I'm employed by a production company called Drama Republic, or I was employed. Who knows how it works anymore? But we're sort of hired by Netflix to create a Sherlock Holmes drama, which we've been filming in Liverpool. I was lucky enough to kind of get a job as a trainee on that, which is great as an aspiring filmmaker and director. Sort of real hands-on experience in something that's like no nonsense student short film. It's just day one. It was right there. You go. Sort of learn as you go.
And was it always something that you wanted to go into? Obviously, I know you personally through our university that we went to, but take us back to Alex when he was 6, 7, 8 years old. Was it always something that you wanted to do?
I think so, yeah. I think I've always kind of loved films, even when I was little, and some of my earliest memories are like faffing around in the back garden with a camera and some plastic dinosaurs and saying, right, you run right the way down there and I'll hold this dead close to the camera and it'll look like you're getting eaten. But yeah, it's always kind of, on a tape camera as well. And I'm going, when the tape's full, I'll edit it. And I'm like, I don't even know what that means. I'm 7 years old. But I just kind of knew, I think then that I really wanted to do it. And then I went through school and I was kind of like, oh yeah, but this film and that film, and I did media studies, and that kind of opened my eyes. And then obviously, as Sam mentioned, that we went to the same sort of college and uni at LMA, where I kind of really, really sort of started studying films properly, and I just fell in love with it. It's one of the best things to me. So yeah.
What is your favourite film? Have you got a favourite film?
You can't ask questions like that to someone who's like...
because I'm going to ask Sam the same one. Sam, what's your favourite film?
It's so difficult.
For me, I love Back to the Future. I actually really...
Respect.
Marty!
Mine's Jaws. I love Jaws. Jaws is my favourite film.
I watched Jaws recently and I read the book as well, which is it's nowhere near as good as the film. The book was a big disappointment, but I think just nostalgic for nostalgic purposes, Jurassic Park, I think, is my favourite film. But it's sort of like changes on a weekly basis depending on what I've just watched. And what I've sort of watched again and fallen in love with or appreciated it in a different way
All
that I
Spielberg
haven't
as well,
before.
sort of related projects there as
Yeah,
well. So
that's it. Yeah, it's just kind of. I think he's just, isn't he, really? He makes just the best films. At least back in the 70s and 80s and 90s, maybe not so much anymore. But yeah, it's such a difficult question. But Jurassic Park's just, it's one of my all-time favorites, and that being the film, obviously, that I think inspired me the most. I remember going to see the third one in cinemas, and people were kind of like screaming and going, ah! And my mum just said that I was just sat there like completely engrossed in the screen and not like didn't want to blink for in case I missed any of it. So I should probably say Jurassic Park. Yeah, I think so.
And you said at the beginning then when we mentioned that you work in conjunction with Netflix that it was difficult. It was difficult for you at the beginning, but you found your feet in the role.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think as with starting any job, it's tough. Yeah, I've gone from sort of working at a theatre, which was the Empire in Liverpool, which was sort of you should rock up at 6 o'clock for your shift at 15:15, and you're out the door by 10:30, 11 o'clock, and then you're in bed, and then you just sort of rinse and repeat basically for the next day. But this is like, all right, cool, you're going to be at Stoke for 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, and you're not going to be back in Liverpool till sort of 1 o'clock the next morning. And it was a kind of like, it was a bit of a wake-up call, really. And it was like, well, yeah, this is what I'm going to have to kind of get used to. And of course, just the sort of lingo, and you work with people who've done it for however many years before. So it was a bit daunting at first, just to get used to it. But I'd like to think that I found a sort of a nice little foothold for myself to sort of.
Did you say you were doing a Sherlock Holmes in Liverpool?
Yes, yeah. So it's called The Irregulars. I don't know how much I can say about it, but it's sort of about the kids that I think Sherlock and John sort of hire to solve these sort of paranormal and supernatural mysteries around London.
Yeah, because I found like recently there's a lot of films or shows in Liverpool at the moment. When Sam and I went up to the Adelphi to do some work.
Yeah.
They were doing the Sherlock Holmes in the Adelphi and just with the big room, and they were also saying they did Peaky Blinders in there as well. And...
Yeah, so with that, I'm sort of hoping that none of the people who I work with are watching this, but with that was like where we just, because about the
and that losing you, I think.
We potentially might have just lost Alex there, but don't worry. I think he was going to talk about the different venues that he's probably been around. I know that I've watched his Instagram and his Facebook. He's out everywhere in the UK. I think we've got Alex back now. Alex, just repeat what you were just saying then.
Hello. Yeah. So as I was saying, the Adelphi, I think we used as a sort of space for the background artists to sort of get changed and get their makeup done, and then we had like minibuses lined up and we shipped them off to the location then, which is it's really fascinating, all the different bases. You know, we've been to like army reserves, and I caught Sam saying there that I've sort of been here, there and everywhere really. And it's sort of great to kind of explore these different places in Stoke or in like an army reserve centre.
Liverpool's a great city for buildings and scenery, isn't it? It's got some fantastic buildings, and you can see why some of these directors want to film in the streets of Liverpool, because just for the buildings and the heritage of the buildings, you can see why it's popular.
Yeah, so it's a fantastic background, and the sort of one of the when we were sort of interviewed, because I'm a trainee on this, and it's through LMA and the Liverpool Film Office and things like that. So part of like the deal was that we get just as much kind of press stuff about us, which is rare for a trainee. But a story that I like to tell to them is that when I was in college at LMA, they asked us to kind of, if you could film Sherlock Holmes in Liverpool, pick 3 locations that would be, great. And where would you do Baker Street? And where would you do this? And where would you do that? And the same, I picked Faulkner Street for Baker Street, and that's we use falconry quite a lot in ours, and I was like, yeah, that's a nice kind of reassurance that I've got the same taste as people on Netflix.
Are you watching any series on Netflix at the moment? Is there anything you can recommend?
I'm just kind of rewatching stuff. I'm watching Better Call Saul at the minute, but I'm not up to date. I'm on series 3, I think. Out of 4 or 5. But I'm just kind of been rewatching stuff. I've been rewatching the thick of it because obviously a lot of what's on TV at the minute is very political. And given the circumstances, every other channel is just constant politicians saying this is good, this is bad, this is this, this is that. But the thick of it, I think, is just great. And it's very it's quite on the nose about some things as well. And I think it's got Peter Capaldi in it, who's just great. He plays a spin doctor, a very, very sweary spin doctor if you've not seen it. But some of the scenarios they're just incredible. So I really recommend that. And then I've just kind of been watching a lot of different films that I've watched before. I watched, as I said before, I watched Jaws recently. I watched The Shining a while ago, and some behind the scenes info on that. About how he goes crazy because he's locked inside his own house, which I can relate to on a personal level. And then I watched a fantastic film. I watched a great film called Captain Fantastic recently, and it was just something else. It's got Viggo Mortensen, who played Aragorn in Lord of the Rings. He plays this sort of dad, and he lives with his 6 kids, I think it is, in a forest somewhere, and he sort of teaches them politics and sort of morals and how to hunt and how to skin animals and all this amazing stuff. And then their mum dies in hospital in the city, and it's about their sort of integration into society. And it was just so fascinating to watch, the reliance that we have on capitalism and this sort of American school system, I guess, sort of played a big part of it because, his kids are far more intellectually advanced than anyone because they're just taking pics of what they want to read and what they find interesting, and that kind of fuels their own sort of intelligence. And it was just a really well made film. I was in bits by the end of it, as I am probably with most films, but it's just incredible if you get the chance to watch it. That's on Netflix.
Fantastic. Well, there you go, folks. You've got some options for you during quarantine. Jaws, Back to the Future. You've got plenty there to keep you occupied for the next hopefully 3 weeks, and then we can leave. But knowing the circumstances, every day it changes. So obviously make sure that you're keeping in touch with everything, including the likes of the BBC online. But one thing you can do for us is like our social media. Go to Facebook and like us. Obviously, if you're watching us, you probably liked the page. But one thing that is even more imperative for us is to make sure that you have liked this video. Please like this video and share it to other people. People that maybe want to get on the podcast and have a platform to say about what they've done in the industry, music, film, whatever it may be. And also just people who want to listen. Obviously, there's thousands of people on Facebook Live and on Instagram that are doing their thing. We want to take this platform and go as far as we can with it through quarantine and beyond. On Twitter, it's CLiveNTeta1, and on Instagram, it's CLiveUK. So make sure you go and follow our social medias. It would be absolutely great if you could do that for me. But going back to yourself, Alex, you said you've worked for Netflix, grew up loving film, wanting to be in film, working to do with film. You've got another string to your bow, and that is being a director, but specifically for theatre. Yeah. Now, tell us a little bit more about your company that you've put together.
Yeah, so I sort of have a theatre production company. I guess we're going to sort of branch out and doing short films. I've got a couple in the can that we were kind of working on until all this sort of went down. So, we're sort of a production company, so to speak, called Fruit Jar Productions. It was kind of founded by myself and 5 other people we sort of met in other circumstances and said, this would be great. Let's form a theatre company and let's create and let's do what we're good at. And we've got some great performers and singers and actors, and it's just it's great to kind of showcase the talent that the Northwest has to offer, and especially Liverpool. But yeah, so as Sam just mentioned, I direct. I've done some short films in the past, and recently I have taken a shine to direct in theatre. And I think it's fascinating. I think it's a very rewarding process, and it's a bit more. Oh, I don't know, maybe. But to me, I think I find it a bit more intense than filmmaking.
Because you've recently just put on a 4-night sold-out show, which is fantastic. Wojciech in the Hope Street Theatre, and that was back in January. And that's, I don't want to say it's a heavy piece, but it probably is a heavy piece. It's a very heavy piece. And I just wanted your take on being the director, rather than becoming a character, through obviously either method acting or whatever sort of acting style that you take on to become this character. How did you feel being the director and watching these characters come to life?
I was constantly blown away by the sort of talent that are in that room, and we sort of, from day one of rehearsals, I threw them in right to the end of the show, which, if as you remember, Sam, was probably the most depressing part about it. And they were the first rehearsals that we had, so it was from that fight scene onwards to obviously the tragic climax of the show. They were the first rehearsals that we had, and then the week after we showed it back to everyone, just to sort of lay the groundwork of, this is what we're all building up to. This is the show. This is the moment where everyone kind of has to realise the sort of meaning of the show, and it's kind of, what's the word, stance, I guess, that it takes on, and its outlook on the world. And then from then, I think everyone kind of went, oh, okay, it's sort of, it's squeaky bum time, I guess. Let's pull our socks up and get on. I'm biased, but I think the results really showed themselves even on that first night. But compared to the last night, it was an incredibly different show. We came up with different parts of the block and in different aspects of the set that would change, and we just manipulated it right up until the last thing. And then I woke up the next day going, I have a great idea for Wojciech, and I've still got them going, and we're sort of talking about, oh well, maybe let's do it again, because the sort of response that we had to it was amazing, and a lot of people were asking, when are you bringing it back, which is great for a first show for a couple of people who have only just sort of made their name on the theatre scene. It's almost unknown, but yeah, we're very proud of that.
Well, I had the chance to go and see it myself, and I actually saw it on the first night, and I was blown away just by the realism of the piece, and actually coming out at the end being confused. And I think for people that have seen it will know what I mean by that. I don't know if you want to go a little bit more in depth, Wojciech the character, because the idea of the show, or the premise of the show, is that he goes through a medical trial, and he then becomes mentally ill. Am I right by saying that? Mentally ill.
The way that we created the character of Wojciech, we said that there was always this sort of instability with him, and this drug that the doctor gives him might be a placebo, it might not be. We have our own theories on what it was, but we're sort of kept that to Jordan to say, whatever you think it is, Jordan who played Wojciech, you sort of don't tell us, because I don't want my decisions to be influenced by that, and I don't want the other characters to kind of to know either, especially the doctor. But effectively, the drug that he gives him is testosterone, so it just makes him a lot more. It makes him a lot more aggressive, and a lot more sort of shouty and weird. But because he has got this instability, and he was sort of abused by his mom as a child, and He's been through 7 or 8 different foster families. It's kind of left a bit of a negative impact on him. And these pills kind of wake that up and sort of bring back ghosts from the past, which come back to haunt him, and then he sort of falls subject to his own inner turmoil, his own paranoia, really. And it has this really sort of tragic climax where he comes to the conclusion that he's because he thinks he's not enough for anyone because he's been passed around all these families. He doesn't really think that he's worth anyone's love, and he then assumes that his girlfriend Marie, who they have a baby with, she is cheating on him with his best mate in the army, and ultimately he thinks that the only way that he can keep her love and that the only way he can express his love for her is if he kills her and then himself, which was the end of the show. So it was a really quite a heavy sort of interesting piece, I think, for us to sort of talk about the way that mental illness is discussed in media and in politics and in society. Like, there are people like Wojciech walking the streets every single day and no one, bats an eyelid at them. So hopefully what we did with Wojciech, it sort of opened people's eyes to the impact of mental illness and the importance of, really lending a helping hand to people who are suffering.
I think as well, coming away from the performance as well on the first night was the music. Music within theatre plays a big role, but from a director's point of view, you must have obviously you're the main guy that has the say on what's in and what's out, but how much do you think that is replicated in the industry itself? Do you think it plays a big part within theatre?
Yeah, I think it depends on the director. I'm quite because I come from a film background, I was able to think more cinematically about the piece, and that did sort of, for all my films and for future shows that I'm doing, we make a playlist on Spotify, and we get the cast to listen to it, and we take inspiration from that, really. And there was this amazing rehearsal once where Jordan was doing that sort of end scene just after he'd killed Marie, and we played him the song Exit Music for a Film by Radiohead, and the sort of lyrics with the marriage of the dialogue that he's delivering was just amazing, and the sort of both the music and the scene crescendoed at the same time, and they sort of died out at the same time.
Do you find that music in film can completely change the scene, the mood? When I was in university, I did music in film, and it was just fascinating how music plays such an important part in film. But no one really, when you're watching the film, you don't really listen to music because there's that much going on visually. Sometimes the music gets lost, but if you sit back and actually just listen to the music, it's probably one of the most important things in a film.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And, as I'm sure you both agree, that sort of music dictates, I think, the direction that a scene's taken. Obviously, there's this amazing video that I saw when it must have been about 11 or 12, and it made me laugh so much. And that sort of probably turned me on to the idea of music in film, really. But it was a video of the Daleks from a 70s episode of Doctor Who, and there's this really dramatic, intense music as they're going down the streets of London. And, you sort of get goosebumps and you're like, oh, that's scary. And then they said, okay, now here it is with different music. And it was the Benny Hill soundtrack. And it's ridiculous seeing these sort of wooden things just sort of like cluttering down the streets. And you go, oh, so what really makes them scary? Because it's the 70s and they're not the best, well-made things in the world. It's music and the importance of music and sound effects and the sort of the way that they speak, and this, what you hear in film and theatre is extremely, extremely important, because I don't think the scenes in Wojciech will have been half as impactful without some of the music that we played, or without some of the sound effects that we had. We at the very end we used a Nick Cave song called Skeleton Tree, which is an amazing recommendation by my girlfriend. But I wasn't going to use that specific song until she said listen to it. And I just thought it was great in the lyrics that he sings in that song is about things not being free, basically, and the sort of in Wojciech a big theme is money and the lack of, and that just kind of really, I think it sold it for me, basically, and so I think if you're right, Chris, if you do sit back and listen to the music in films, whether there's lyrics in it or not, you will feel something and you'll take it away. I think one of the masters of that is Hans Zimmer and John Williams. They're both kind of amazing. Going back to Jaws, that sort of rubber shark wouldn't be half as...
It's just those two notes, isn't it?
Yeah.
Instantly, it's recognisable. It creates the atmosphere, and it's as soon as you hear that music, you know what film it's from. I think that's the beauty of someone like John Williams. He's done so many amazing films and soundtracks of films, but every one is so different. But the atmosphere it creates is fantastic. I've been watching this week, for most of the lockdown, The Empire Strikes Back, because my son is now obsessed with Star Wars at 2, which is not a bad, because it's my favourite Star Wars film. So, but the music is just unbelievable. The bit when Yoda's taking the X-wing up the swamp to where he's in the car, Han Solo's in the car, but it's just fantastic music in film. When I did my degree, I had to choose a film to analyse myself, and I was like, right, well, I'm not going to go for the obvious ETs and all that. I'm going to go for Carry On Camping.
Nice. How did that go?
And the reason why I went for Carry On Camping, because I love the Carry On films. Catherine doesn't let me watch them, by the way. But she says, turn that off. And, but every character had his own little theme, and that's what I liked about it. And in the film, so say if Charles Hawtrey came on, he had his own little theme. So as soon as this character was on, that was his theme. And then Sid James, he was on, he had a completely different theme. And it gave each character a little music identity through the film. And that's why I picked it. But as I say, there's so many different things you can do. I love spaghetti westerns. I just think they're the most fantastic films. And the soundtracks for them are just unbelievable. I saw something called the Spaghetti Western Orchestra a few years ago. If you can see them at any point, just they play the music, and the guy could whistle just unbelievably well. Like the classic, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah.
To whistle so well on cue was amazing. But they were using crazy things. Like at one point, all the lights went off, and you could just hear like someone walking through the desert or something, and the lights came on, and he had a microphone in a box of cornflakes, and he was just in there. Wow. It was just amazing.
Yeah,
that's the sound effects side of film, isn't it?
Yeah, I was just about to say, about 2 years ago, it would be this time 2 years ago, I'd sort of just finished a short film called Plastic Soup, and it's about pollution in the sea, but obviously, because you're filming on a beach in the middle of sort of end of March, sort of beginning of April, it's kind of, the weather's not the best, and especially in the UK. So we didn't use any audio from the day, so I had to go back and do it all again. this ridiculous video of me with this tub of sand and my hand in these kid wellies, just kind of like digging around in the sand, making the sound effect of him running, and then watching the footage and sort of going and like, yeah, it's ridiculous. Like, Star Wars has been ruined for me. That they said the sound of footsteps on the Millennium Falcon is a sort of pizza tray on top of an old Apple Mac, like one of the big computers.
Is that true?
And then a sort of just walking around, and a lightsaber is like salad tongs when they pick up the lightsaber in the air. That sort of like it's salad tongs just being pressed together. It's ridiculous, and it ruins it for me. And now I've ruined it for you too.
Yeah, that means I'm going to get, instead of buying Theo a lightsaber, I'm going to get him some salad tongs. And then it's the same effect.
Yeah, pretend. But it's ridiculous, like the sort of the efforts that you have to go to in films, and something else that you mentioned earlier about sort of little characteristics, and each character has their own theme. The Dark Knight 2008 soundtrack's just unbelievable for that sort of thing. The Joker's got like his own little motif, which was done with razor blades on a violin string, I think it might have been, or a piano string, and it makes the most incredible. We use that in voice check as well, but it just makes the most incredible increase of tension that sort of builds and builds and builds, but doesn't crescendo. So it just makes you on edge for the entire thing, and that's such an inventive way, I think, of making music, because it's so unconventional.
Do you know what one of the most fascinating things I could imagine to be as a filmmaker or a documentary maker like you, so is sort of the wildlife programs, the Attenboroughs, the Blue Planets, and all. They must just spend absolute months and months and months just filming the same thing over and over and over again. It must be so. You've got to have patience, I think, in your game to get the perfect shot, to get the perfect
100%.
lighting. Everything's got to be right, hasn't it?
Yeah, there's two things that they said never work with, and it's kids and animals. So, and I worked with kids doing plastic soup, but the sort of Attenborough got, I think it was into quite a bit of trouble a couple of years ago, because they found out that some of the footage they'd shot in a zoo in Berlin, so they could kind of manipulate it a bit and say, okay, well, we'll just put this animal in here and let's see what happens, kind of thing. So, but obviously, just sort of when you're out in the polar ice caps and you just sat there waiting for a penguin to walk past, and then you go, I forgot to take the lens cap off. It's a nightmare. And you kind of, you do have to have incredible patience. And when we were shooting Plastic Soup, going back to the kids thing, we had a wonderful child actor. He was honestly unbelievable, and the sort of levels that he went to, he just threw himself in head first, basically. But the scene revolved around him. The film was basically about what if a child had become entangled in the pollution in the sea and like nets and plastics and things like that. Because at what point do we stop care? At what point do we start caring about pollution in the sea? And it'd be horrible if a kid did it. Why is it okay to let an animal die just because we can't be bothered to put it in a bin? But this kid, and we were sat there for about 45 minutes while he sort of rolled around in the water, and because it was so cold, and because it was like, I'd assumed the first time he'd done anything like it, he was having a bit of difficulty sort of getting into it, which is, understandable. I'd hate to do that. But it was just a patience game, really, and then we just sort of kept the camera rolling while he was practicing, and half of that footage is in the film, because I think it's just so... It's a lot more natural, I think, than performance. And when we did a trailer for Void Check as well, I think 3 or 4 of the shots in that are just taken from one or two of the cast listening to what I'm saying. But for example, Ant, who played Andrews, he gives this stare to someone off camera, and it was just so menacing, which fit his character perfectly. But he's actually just listening to me, so I don't know what that says about how he felt about me in the moment, but it was just really scary. It looked like he wanted to kill someone. And I use that because there's nothing quite like just having this natural kind of performance when people aren't really paying attention to the camera and they're just sort of instinctively, performing. And I think it's great. I use a lot of natural, I guess, stuff in that film.
It seems to me, Alex, just by looking at the projects that you've done, that there is kind of a meaning behind them. Is that a subconscious, decision, or is it not? Like, obviously, Wojciech about mental health, Plastic, your own, movie is about waste going into the sea. Do you look for specific projects that have that meaning, that moral kind of outlook to work on?
Not necessarily. I think with Plastic Soup, it was kind of like to try something that's a little bit more sort of... I'd like to try something that had a different meaning, than what's actually portrayed in the film. And I did want to, the year before, about fox hunting, which is a sort of similar concept. It's humans being hunted by these creatures, and then you find out that it's foxes at the end, and that was well received. So I was like, there's something in this. So that just started as an idea, and I was like, okay. And I sort of, when I was developing ideas for Plastic Soup, I was like, oh, what if I sort of adapt that sort of core idea and that worked? But with Wojciech, I kind of just, when I saw Jordan doing like a sort of abridged version of it, LMA, I kind of really loved the script and the way it was just so bitey and kind of, it was different to your sort of Shakespeare's and everything else that's really sort of safe within theatre. I think this was the first show that I'd seen that was kind of really sort of graphic and explicit, and it stuck with me. And then I was absolutely hammered in a bar with Jordan shortly after we'd sort of formed this company, and I was like, Jordan, here's an idea, mate. What if we do Wojciech? And he was like, do it. And I think that night, it must have been about 1:15 in the morning, I emailed the licensing company. But, I think sort of subconsciously I knew that I wanted to tell this story. It is an amazing story to tell. And the next piece that we're doing is sort of about the importance of family, but it's about the miners' strike, and it's about sort of growing up in working class England. And, that's something I think that everyone in our cast can relate to, and hopefully everyone who comes to watch it can kind of understand, and they'll pay attention to it and really kind of appreciate the heart that goes into it, because we all apply our own experiences. And I think that's also something that I do when I direct. It's apply our own personal feelings and kind of experience to it. That was something we did with Wojciech. It was kind of toyed with the idea with Jordan, and like, how would you deliver these lines if you were talking to your best friend? And they really ran with that theme, and it was great. And we then rehearsals where the whole lot of us would just sit there and cry because it was just really heavy. But I think some of at those moments you really get the best performances. So I think it's a mix of both subconscious and sort of, you have to go looking for a good story first, and then you start applying your own meaning and your own personal sort of drive, I guess. And with Plastic Soup, that is something I feel quite strongly about, is plastic in the sea, or removing the plastic from the sea and not putting it in. So I think I knew that I kind of wanted to tell that story, and then that really helped, develop the ideas. And what went into the film then was probably subconsciously somewhere I was saying, do this, do that, do that. And the theme of environment, like in the first scene, in fact, throughout the majority of the film, the predominant colours are blue and green. In the mum's office at the beginning, we went to the point of like, myself and Sean, who helped with production design on it, we sort of went to the extent of making sure that on the pinboard there was only blue and green pins. The pinboard was blue, only blue and green books on the shelf. There was a copy of Jaws there as well. And like blue and green pens, and you would never ever notice that on a normal level, but subconsciously you go, oh, this the themes about the environment and the sea, and recycling and things like that. So I think my sort of intentional actions deliver something subconscious for an audience. So I think it's a mix of both. To answer your question.
You were very meticulous in your pin board. Just like our sponsor. Hey, that was a segue and a half. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here. I know it was brilliant. We're here thanks to AZ Creations. They're today's sponsor. And like I said before, they are a creative studio based in Liverpool and in Manchester. And they are here to offer you a range of design and promotional services tailored to fit your business. So you're looking for a unique and stylish logo that will effectively deliver on your company message, or an eye-catching poster to help sell tickets to your latest show? Well, A to Z Creations are here to help. They are here to deliver in providing businesses with high-quality professional branding. We actually have used A to Z Creations. I don't know if you can tell, Alex, our brand new podcast logo. What do you think of that logo then, Alex?
I think it's beautiful, son.
It is.
I just think
it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. But it's very slick, exactly. The design and consultation process was quick and easy to do. They were able to identify what we needed specifically and deliver the final finished product within 2 days, which is, unbelievable considering, it's hard work. It is hard work. So the See Live podcast listeners can get a free consultation. All they need to do is simply follow their Instagram, their Twitter, or they can send an email as well. Just make sure that they use the code NEWCLIENT10, and they will be able to get a consultation for a logo, a poster, and get a quote off them as well. So if you want to get the edge in a highly competitive market, make sure that there's consistency throughout your logo, your social media, your website, and the guys at A to Z Creations will be able to help you. So make sure that you take the first step with A to Z Creations. So that's the reason. Did you like that? Oh, thank you so much, Chris. Thank you. I was literally reading. What else do you want me to do? What else do you want me to do? I've learned to read, guys. Thank you so much. Alex, Chris, take it away. Go on.
Speaking of new shows, I was just going to... what have you got lined up then for the next foreseeable future then?
So, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, we've got a couple of short films that I've written myself, and obviously being in this production company, we've got a few actors that we can kind of throw at it, which is great. But obviously, given the circumstances, we can't quite get to work on that, so we're sort of pushing that to the very back of the agenda. Our next official show that we're doing is Salt of the Earth by John Godber, which is a piece about family and relationships and the importance of that. And then... Where's he? Oh, he's back. So we've got that coming up, which is the 4th of August, all being well, at the Hope Street Theatre again. And then, as well as that, I'm writing a show at the minute about the Beatles. It's sort of set on the day of the infamous rooftop concert back in January '69, and it's sort of this speculative piece on, that they make this executive decision to kind of they are no longer going to be the Beatles, and it's what did they talk about? How did they come to that agreement? So there's a lot of arguing, there's a lot of sort of reminiscing, there's a lot of playing music, but a lot of the script is sort of verbatim, as in the sense that it's the dialogue in some places is lifted directly from interviews that they've given beyond that point, but I've sort of adapted it and put it into play as though they spoke it for the first time in this meeting room, and it's just been such a fascinating little adventure learning about our beloved Beatles. And
so is that something you'd have to do a lot of research for, factually and stuff like that?
Oh, I've got books coming of everywhere, really, about the Beatles. I could probably tell you what colour socks John Lennon was wearing on the day of the rooftop concert. That's like how meticulous he kind of had to be. They were green, by the way. They weren't. It kind of have to know a lot about it and just sort of build up to it, and the sort of mood, and a lot of research as well to things that you don't really think would be kind of relevant. Like, I've just written a piece, they sort of reminisce about when they met Elvis and how he'd moved on to do films, because the whole point is that John thinks the Beatles should move on, and he wants to do his own thing now, like Elvis did. So I found myself at like 2:00 in the morning the other day, sort of reading about Elvis and his mood back in '64 or '65 when they met him. Like, how was he feeling? Like, what made him want to move on? And and then I just hammered out a good couple of pages of them back and forth, and it was great. Kind of just learning all this new information, but as you say, it's a lot of reading and a lot of researching and on things that you don't necessarily think are relevant.
It was quite a strange meeting, wasn't it? They didn't sound very long. But...
Yeah, it was kind of, I think, as my research tells me, because the Beatles were like much bigger than Elvis, like, and Help had just come out and was a flop, so he was kind of they were on edge a little bit. It's sort of awkward, but they ended up having like a jamming session, and they played I Feel Fire and another couple of songs. So, I think Elvis said, like, if you're just going to stare, they all just kind of had a laugh about it. And then he was like, bring some guitars in, we'll do that. Ringo just ended up like tapping a coffee table or something with his fingers because he didn't have a drum. But I think John sort of very cheekily turned around to Elvis and was like, "Hey, when are you going to do a proper album though, instead of just these songs about love
Wow.
for your films?"
And that was the beginning of the end.
I think so. Yeah, and then sort of as it went on, they kind of, their last sort of, yeah, pretty much. It was the only time that they met him, and then obviously the Beatles sort of started to decline in their kind of relationship as well, because they did all just want to move on and do bigger and better things, really. But certain members didn't, and certain members just wanted a little bit more recognition for their songs, and other factors in their personal lives sort of led to the decline of the Beatles, so to speak. So it's been a fascinating little adventure for me to read this. So hopefully I'll sort of finish this script soon, and then I'm just going to sort of workshop it with actors and try and put it on. I want to try and get it a Beatles week at some point, but I think for this sort of show it needs to be, you can't just kind of not be bothered with it, really. You kind of have to really throw it, not just assume we can have this character playing this character as well as someone else who's quite important. So it's not really, you can't really go at it, sort of half eye on the prize and then just thinking about, oh, it's the Beatles, it'll be fine. That's my thing. I'm coming at it from a sort of theatre aspect, and I'm writing a play. This is the play. The Beatles is a separate entity. This is about a breakup, and this is two parents, John and Paul, and their two kids, George and Ringo. And Ringo's the kind of kid who's too young to really understand what's going on, but he's the one who says the most heavy-hitting things. And George is the one who's sort of the stubborn teenager now who wants a bit more recognition. Coming at him, the fact that it's the Beatles is just kind of, I think, that's the sub kind of category. So
fantastic. Well, I think I've got one final question. Theatre, or film in the next 10 years? Where do you see yourself?
You can't ask me that, Sam.
Well, guess what, Alex? I just did, and I want an answer.
It's difficult.
Look, there are many ways you can get around this. You could say, "Oh, I could film a theatre production," or
yeah, well, that's something that I'm always interested in. I love film and theatre. I think it's great, but I think presently I've sort of tried writing films, and I have done, but I've sort of got my eye on theatre a little bit more than I thought I would before Wojciech. And now that I've done that, I've kind of gone, "Ooh, that's interesting."
There's something about the theatre. There's something about the theatre, though, isn't there? That's quite amazing. And when we've done theatre things, Sam and I, it's the backstage and it's the build up, and it's about to start. There's something quite magical about the theatre.
Well, I think it's also the immediacy of it as well, as you say. It's kind of like it's there and it's happening. You've done a good job right at the end of the show. Whereas with film, I'm kind of, especially with the regulars, obviously it's thousands of people working on the same thing towards the same goal, but we won't know if that's been well received until it comes out, and at this point who knows when. But with theatre you sort of get that immediate sort of response. And I think that's great, but also, as you say, the backstage behind it all, I absolutely adore it. There's moments when we did our press run for our press performance for that he uses at the end of the show kind of didn't work anymore. So it popped open and the caps with the bullets fell on the floor, and I was like, oh my god, it's the worst. We're not even gonna open at the end of the month. And it was amazing just to see Jordan sort of, because it's just him on stage. No one else can help him because he's killed Florence, he's killed Marie at that point. So she can't help him pick up the bullets. He has to do it himself. And it was amazing just to see something in Jordan's head turn on, pick up these bullets, put them in the gun. Then it didn't go off when he tries to kill himself at the end. And just to see him sort of the tears in the desperation of the character. And I was like, yeah, that's great. You don't get that with film because someone comes in and just fixes it. But I can't do that in theatre because it's weird if the director
he just kind of ad-libbed that, did he? And he just...
Well, yeah. So he's just sort of meant to just shoot himself, really, as Sam will tell you, but gone out of his trousers and it popped open.
Right.
The caps fell out. So then he sort of fumbled around on the floor like it was a mistake, and he was like, "Come on, I can't even get this right because the character's so pathetic."
Fab, yeah.
And
So
then he put it to his head, and it just clicked. And in the room, everyone just sort of went, and you do feel sorry for him in that moment. And then the second time, and the gun went off, and everyone was crying, and I was crying, and yeah, you know, it was. But again, you don't get that sort of immediacy with film because that's not necessarily the scripted take. So, or that's not necessarily a scripted moment, so it won't get used. And everyone just sort of laughs if the gun goes off, and you go, "Ha ha ha! Cut! We'll do it again." But in this instance, it was no. You have to run with that. And thankfully, I had an amazing cast. So if something did go wrong, they knew how to cover it well. And I'm sure even in that fight scene at the end, someone got punched. I'm certain of it, but they carried on because they're troopers, and I loved them eternally for it.
News off the press. I've just been told that Florence was actually alive when he dropped the bullets, because I almost died a real death.
Oh, yes, yeah, so did I. It was horrible. It was a real horrible experience. It felt like it went on for all 20 minutes of him just trying to load the gun.
But that's live theatre for you, yeah. And like you said, it's live theatre, and you know, I've had mistakes singing, acting, musical theatre where mic packs fall off, and you've just got to deal with it and get on. So
yeah, and it's a sort of credit to the performer and to the whole team, really, if you can sort of run with that and turn that into something magic, which is what Jordan did and what the rest of the gang did. And you know, I didn't really do much. I just sort of stood there in the tack box going, "What are we gonna do?" Yeah, I know. Yeah, I think it was on the last night as well. It popped out, and I was like, I turned around to Rachel, who was doing our lights, and I was like, "Oh my god, the gun's broken, the gun's broken, the gun's broken." And this is on the last night. I was like, "This is the worst. I hate it." But he did the same thing as he did in that press performance, and like he just absolutely nailed it. And so yeah, it's a credit to performers, really. If something goes wrong, they pick it up, which is what I love about theatre. The immediacy of it.
You've got to react, haven't you? You've got to react. Things happen. It's like when Sam and I gig and stuff like that. Things every night different, and you just got to be able to just think fast.
And the audience know as well. Like, they pick up on it, and that's what's great. You can feel that sort of palpable tension in the audience because they know that that's not supposed to happen, but because they're watching a good performer.
Yeah.
They know that they trust what's going to happen next. Whereas if you're sort of watching something where things have been going wrong the whole way and the cast are sort of going, "Isn't that silly?" You kind of lose that tension. But the fact that this wouldn't work at one particular moment, it did not break the audience's engagement once. And, we still got to stand crying their eyes out at the end. And that's the most rewarding thing, really. If I can affect someone with something that I do, or if my team can affect them with their performance, that's, even if it's just one person, that's the best thing for us, really.
Brilliant. And how can the people find out more about your productions and any upcoming dates for performances? Obviously the climate that we're in at the moment with coronavirus, and just a reminder, everyone that's doing as they're told, stay inside, only go out for essentials. Thank you so much. It means a lot coming from my point of view with me nana suffering with COPD. You're doing her a favour. You're doing all the people that are not per se suffering, but would suffer if they got this virus. So thank you so much. But where can people find Old Fruit Jar Productions and also yourself? Plug yourself, Alex.
Yeah, we're on Facebook, Old Fruit Jar Productions. Just search that on Facebook, you'll come up. Our logo is literally little fruit jar, as taken from the Elvis song Blue Suede Shoes. We're on Twitter and Instagram as well. So just sort of give us a like, give us a follow, keep you as up to date as we can. Obviously, circumstances permitting, there isn't really much news at the minute, but hopefully soon we'll be able to get back in action with loads of rehearsals, photos and videos, and we're going to kind of throw ourselves at this next one because we've got such a short space of time to promote our next show and get it on its feet, basically, that we're going to do as much as we can and hopefully make it a bit more of a sort of two-way relationship between audience and us, where you can kind of see what's going on behind those closed doors. I think with Wojciech, I kind of wanted to keep it a secret because it was so heavy hitting. But with Salt of the Earth, it's a bit more relaxed and it's a comedy, so that'll be nice. Yeah, so sort of give us a like and give us a follow. We'll keep you as up to date as possible. So
absolutely.
And if you need any extras, Sam and I are always available for our skills, aren't we, Sam?
We're available to some extent. I mean, I don't come cheap. I'm not gonna lie.
I tried with Sam, and he wasn't free, so Zim crossed off my list.
I don't think he liked me. I think the audition wasn't bad enough, Chris.
He's a very expensive extra, though. You have to remember this. He's very expensive to hire, Sam.
Yeah.
He says that. Just get me 2 pints and a pack of crisp and I'll be fine.
Get him a biscuit and you're all right.
I know, I saw him chomping on a cookie before this.
Right, I think that's time to end this podcast before my secrets get out. Listen, thank you so much for tuning into the Sea Live podcast. This was week number 5. I didn't think we'd get to 5, I'll be honest, Chris.
We're doing well.
We're doing well.
Scraping the barrel at me as well.
The cookie jar battle. That is
scraping the old fruit jar, the bottom of the old fruit jar.
Exactly, the old fruit jar. But guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Chris, goodbye.
Bye. Have a lovely week, everyone. Be safe and stay in. Stay in.
And Alex, goodbye to yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Pleasure.
It's been a blast.
This podcast was brought to you by A to Z Creations, the one-stop shop for design, logos, anything you need. Get in contact with them. Make sure that you follow them on Instagram, Twitter, and their email. If you want a free consultation, use the code NEWCLIENT10 and they'll help you out. Like I said, we've used their services. They've been absolutely fantastic, and we'll probably be using them in the future, no doubt. But that has been the Sea Live podcast. Thank you so much, guys. Stay safe, stay inside. See you next week. Bye bye.
See you guys.